Oi, 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 everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Of course, unclench your jaw and get some water today. Be sure you take your medications if you haven't already. Look, we're going to dive into the developer update today for the newest 6.7.0, I believe, that is going to be coming out what I assume to be next week. They usually do the developer update and then the update the following week. And so we're going to talk about what has changed since last week's PTB, which was quite a controversial PTB. First of all, we're going to talk about healing. Healing is one of the big major changes that they made here. In the PTB, they say the PTB raised the base healing time to 24 seconds from the usual 16. So if you unhooked a teammate and you were healing them under the hook, 24 seconds. If you were healing yourself with a med kit, 24 seconds, right? And that meant that using things like self-care got a lot more difficult. And that meant that perks like Sloppy Butcher and Chlorophobia got that much more potent. So after reviewing player feedback, we found that many of you agreed that the speed which you heal others was already in a good spot prior to the update. The change also had knock-on effects, like domino effects, elsewhere in the game, making effects like Mangled and Hemorrhage stronger and making slugging, leaving survivors in the dying state, even more effective. Therefore, we've reverted the base healing time to 16 seconds. On the other hand, we found there was a lot of support for tuning down medkits. In particular, medkits allowed survivors to heal themselves multiple times wherever it was convenient to them, leaving their teammates free to work on generators while they do so. We have decided to shift our focus to medkits with a series of changes. So this is really important. Before we go too much further, it's really important to know that was generally what the community wanted, right? Being able to heal yourself and be independent while your team just worked on gens was a bigger problem than people grouping up. Quite frankly, as a killer player, if people were grouping and I could be like, okay, I'm in a chase, I just saw somebody on a gen and they just unhooked, which means they're probably healing together. That was good for me as a killer. But as Circle of Healing and medkits and this sort of independence started seeding its way into the game, it was like, okay, I'm chasing this guy. I saw that person on a gen and they just unhooked, but one of them could be already on a gen and the other one could just go heal real fast. And that was really tough to deal with as a killer, and it made it so that like you had to be hyper efficient in your chases to some degree, which I think is why a lot of people started bringing like this really heavy-handed slowdown, and I think there's a knock-on effect there, but we can kind of talk about that at a later point in time. So first and foremost, they say all medkits will have a total of 24 charges. That's 1 charge per second, so 24-second heals. Second, we've increased the healing speed bonus when healing others across all medkits. The new bonus is as follow. Camping medkits give you 35%, which is brown. The first aid medkits, that's yellow, will give you 40% healing others. Emergency medkits will give you 45%, those are green, and ranger medkits will give you 50% speed healing others. The good news to know about any of this is that if you bring a medkit in, it may be more beneficial to heal your team with that medkit than to heal yourself. And again, that requires grouping. So while killers may look at those numbers and be like, oh my god, that's crazy, with Built to Last, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but they're still grouping up, which means they're not on gens quite as long. And Built to Last also requires that people go sit in a locker for an inordinate amount of time. So these things aren't intrinsically bad. This is good for the killer experience. And honestly, it's not bad for a survivor experience. It does promote altruism, and that's what we want, people to group up and help each other instead of being entirely independent. Now, they say third, all medkits will now have a 33% speed and efficiency penalty when used for self-healing. This will reduce the number of times a medkit can be used to heal yourself and make it longer to do so. This means that a medkit will by default grant 1 self-heal over the span of 24 seconds before factoring in add-ons. So this is good news, is that if you choose to use a medkit on yourself, you absolutely can, right? If there's 1 person dead, 2 people are on gens, or 1 person's on the final gen, and then 1 person's in chase, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna top up because I don't have adrenaline. Like, there's niche scenarios where you might want to use it on yourself, but that's good. It's good to have that option, and it's good to be able to be like, okay, altruism is the smart play right now, but like we really need to, I don't know, like being able to make tough choices is really, really good. Now, they obviously go over all of the sort of medkit add-ons that are changed, and I'm not going to go over necessarily all of these, but it's worth looking into for those of you that are generally more curious. But for the sake of brevity, we're going to go ahead and move on. At the end of the day, these medkit changes are a W. These are good. I think the idea of grouping up and healing each other and being a team is really, really good. Now, if only we could translate some of those team aspects to things like MMR and whatnot. Now we're looking at the Hillbilly. A lot of people complain about the Hillbilly, and as somebody who hardly has enough sort of time in the Hillbilly to make a consorted sort of statement, I didn't really want to say much about the Hillbilly. I quite frankly don't have enough time. I haven't put enough energy in. I don't really know. When I played the Hillbilly in the PTB, general curving felt great, right? If you were just curving with no add-ons, there was almost no heat buildup. It was incredible to play the Hillbilly and try to curve. However, the Doom Engravings and the Death Engravings being nerfed made it really tough, because at the end of the day, Hillbilly is really difficult. He's hard to master, he's really hard to learn, and he kind of doesn't get a lot of payout for that, right? So the thing about Hillbilly and curving is that you have to ask yourself two questions. Or I guess the thing about Hillbilly is, and why the Death and Doom Engravings were so great for curving, was really the speed. The speed was kind of the big deal, right? Because if you didn't have the speed via the engravings, you had to be a lot closer, which meant that survivors had to be gullible and easy to fool, right? Because, you know, if you're looping and you fake the chainsaw and the survivor doesn't throw the pallet, and you can get that much closer, that's neat. But if they throw the pallet, you don't get any curve. Even then, if they don't throw the pallet, you have to be just close enough, and you have to be able to catch them. There's a lot of ifs and ands and maybes, and the Doom Engravings take a lot of that away. It almost would be better if chainsaw curves were just buffed naturally, so the Doom Engravings weren't quite so necessary, and if most of Hillbilly's add-ons actually went around and sort of floated around the idea of curving instead of all these other facets and things, it might be more beneficial. But generally, the good news is that the Doom and Death Engravings were changed. So they say on the PTB we tested out some changes for the Hillbilly, both toning down the overheat mechanic and adjusting two of his top performing add-ons. While the overheat mechanic felt less oppressive, many of you raised concerns with the changes to the engraving add-ons, reminding us that these add-ons allowed the Hillbilly's power to be used in more situations. This overshadowed the overheat adjustments and made the whole package feel like a downgrade. And that was the one thing I wanted to hit on, is his base kit was made quite a bit better and quite a bit stronger, but that didn't really do a lot, especially for the high tier Billy players. Those engravings were kind of like necessary, the lifeblood of Billy in a lot of cases if you're curving. So they say for the release, we have reverted the changes to the Death Engravings and the Doom Engravings add-ons. We have kept the tweaks to the overheat mechanic to make it less limiting than before, making the Hillbilly feel better to play. This is neat, but unfortunately, it still doesn't really address a lot of the base kit issues with the Hillbilly. So hopefully, sometime soon, we'll see that the sort of turning mechanics, that the speed mechanics, that these sorts of things help the Hillbilly, and so he becomes less add-on reliant, because he is one of the killers that is pretty add-on reliant. But overall, a W. Now, in terms of perks, we're going to dive right in real quick, is that Dead Hard. In the PTB, Dead Hard required that you had to unhook somebody else safely to get value out of it. And there were two concerns here. Well, if my Dead Hard doesn't activate until I unhook somebody safely, well, I'm just going to go farm somebody. Now, this I don't think was ever going to be much of a problem. Not any more than Deliverance was, right? Deliverance and Dead Hard were those things where, like, everybody was always afraid of, I'm going to get farmed off the hook so people could get their perk value. And that just isn't the case, because it did require a safe unhook, right? And it's just too dicey. But the other concern was a valid one, all right? If somebody else has to unhook me to get their Dead Hard, then wouldn't the killer just come for me because I wouldn't have Dead Hard and the person who unhooked does? And that was a valid concern. The concern of, okay, well, the killer's just gonna tunnel me because I have less defenses, right? It made it sound like you're gonna just need to run off the record all the time if you get hooked first, and that was a little bit dicey. So they changed it. For the update's release, we've changed Dead Hard to instead activate when you are unhooked or unhook yourself. This way, the unhooked survivor becomes less of a clear target for the killer. Now, this is really fascinating. This is really interesting. The problem I have with this is, well, if you take a borrowed time hit, if the killer's camping and you take a BT hit or something of this nature, well, you've already used endurance. You don't get Dead Hard after that. So at this point, does Dead Hard need to supersede endurance? This kind of creates a weird, interesting spot where if the killer hits you soon enough, it doesn't matter if you ever had Dead Hard. So there's a little bit of a blind spot here, and I hope the developers see this. But this is overall better. The fact that if you've been the victim of being hooked, now you have a defense in your next potential chase. I don't mind that. I don't think that's a bad thing. And it's just going to encourage killers to not tunnel people, hopefully. We'll see, though. Now, we're going to Scourge Hook Pain Resonance. On the PTB, Pain Resonance was changed to only activate the first time each survivor is placed on the Scourge hook. This change was specifically made to reduce the number of times Pain Resonance could activate in a given match, especially later in the match when one or more survivors were likely to be sacrificed. This was something that I found to be true, especially against Nurse and Blight and higher tier killers and higher skill players. When I'm playing Survivor, it was really rough to have somebody on Death Hook or have somebody dead and still be getting Scourge Hook, right? 1 gen left and you can never really get it done because Scourge Hooks keep popping off. I can see where that's a little bit of a problem, right? Back in the past with Pop Goes the Weasel, you had to hook, and then walk all the way over to the gen, and that might allow some more counterplay from teammates, but Scourge Hook just kind of goes. So I can understand the differential that's happening here. So they say, considering Scourge Hook Pain Resonance can now only activate 4 times in a match and requires the killer to target different survivors, we feel comfortable making it more rewarding for killers to choose to take on the added challenge. So now it's been buffed to 25% off a gen. Now, a lot of people might say, this is really, really rough, but honestly, let's consider the alternatives. In a match, for me as a killer, I could probably get about 8 Scourge Hooks in a match, right? If I'm playing a good match, I could probably get about 8 Scourge Hook value. And that's obviously, you know, on an average match, I would say RNG, obviously, you know, being in my favor to some degree, or if I'm running Agitation. 8 procs of Scourge Hook is devastating to a Survivor team. Yeah, if I got 8 procs of Scourge Hook, that's 120% off of generators across the duration of the entire match. That was a lot. And that's 8. That would mean that everybody's been hooked twice and nobody's dead in some cases, right? So say I get 9, 10, you know, we're seeing 150% off of gens. That's quite a bit. This change here makes it so that across the 4 uses of Scourge Hook, you're getting a guaranteed 100% off. And that isn't a huge differential. If I got 8 procs of Scourge Hook, 120%, 100% for 4, that's not bad. That's an okay thing. And actually, I think this makes Scourge Hook a lot more fair to try to deal with. Now we go down to Boon Circle of Healing. This is the last big change that I think was good. So they say, since this perk no longer grants the self-heal ability, Circle of Healing found itself in an awkward spot. The altruistic heal speed bonus was nice, but when you crunch the numbers, Circle of Healing rarely provided any benefit. A 50% heal speed bonus would only shave off 5 seconds off of a heal, but it's easy to spend that much time running over to the boon's area of effect, and that doesn't even begin to factor in the time it takes to set the boon up. So what they're saying here is if it takes you a duration of time to actually set the boon up yourself, and then, you know, on the first heal, you unhook and you run all the way over and you heal. Instead of, you know, in the PTB, it was 24 seconds. Now you were shaving 5 seconds off or something of that nature, right? It was a lot of time to invest. Was it worth it? No, I'd rather use Will Make It. Okay. So in this case, they've increased the heal speed bonus on Circle of Healing to 100%, right? So this is the same as a Will Make It heal speed. Now, if you're healing a teammate, that would mean that the heal would be about 8 seconds. So if you spend 5 seconds running to the boon and then you heal really, really fast in the boon, that's not bad, especially if you need to reset, right? If you're injured and you unhook somebody else that's injured and you both run to the boon and you heal each other 8 seconds, that's good. You've made great time. You've healed both survivors in the total amount of time it would have taken to heal naturally. That is a net positive. This makes Circle of Healing still a powerful perk because one person brings it and everyone can benefit, but it makes it so survivors do have to travel together. They have to stick together. They have to play together as a team. And this is healthy. I like this. This is pretty good, right? Now, this also means that survivors, you're gonna have to start playing a little bit smarter. Previously, you take a hit, you run to the blue, you heal. It was pretty well that easy in a lot of cases, right? But now this change means like, okay, the boon's all the way across the map. Do we just reset here? Or do we risk it? Is a chase happening over there? Or do we just go here? Do we just heal here? You're gonna have to start thinking more critically about whether you run to that boon, waste 8, 9 seconds. Is it Mother's Dwelling or Dead Dog Saloon? If it's Mother's Dwelling, that's gonna take a little bit, right? And then who knows, you might get there and the killer might catch you on the way, right? Is it worth the risk? So you're gonna have to start playing a little smarter. And I think that this is incredible. I like this change a lot. I think this is a really good change. Kudos to anyone that suggested it. If this means that I'm not gonna really hate hearing boons as a killer because I'm gonna go, they gotta group up. That's okay. They got to group up, right? Does that mean boons could still hurt a killer? Yeah, of course. But Scourge Hook can also absolutely now hurt survivors. So I feel like this is okay. Now the last update is Autohaven Wreckers. They managed to sneak in a change to the map update. Obviously, some of us have seen this really strange tile. Now, some of us have seen this type of tile before that had just a deeply unsafe palette and a kind of junk window. This has now been changed to be a little bit more of a coherent structure where the window and the palette aren't quite so close together. It looks like here the survivors would actually be able to get a meaningful fast vault on the window, as we can see out here, and the palette, I would assume, is right here. Yeah, we can kind of see it, which means that you can almost run this like a pseudo long wall jungle gym. Now, killers could obviously mind game you here and try to like moonwalk, double back. So there's a little bit more counterplay at this tile. As a killer, when I see this tile, I go, yeah, you're taking a hit right here, buddy. Like, this thing sucks. So this is a good change. Good change for survivors, but still a lot of counterplay for killers. Pyramid Head, right? You can still shoot through the wall. Billy can potentially still get curves. Huntress could still get a decent hatchet, line of sight. There's counterplay to be had here, and I don't hate it. So what do you guys think of the update, though? There's a lot of changes that some of you on console never got to experience, but on paper, what does it look like? That being said, we're doing boot camps this Sunday. If you want to come through and get some free coaching, absolutely join our Discord, which is down in the description, and I will be praying to the entity to see you in the next video.